on your way out. See, what we wanted to do as the installation management community is articulate for the larger partners, what are we trying to accomplish? As we transform our installations, what do we need to do? What are those metrics that we're going to focus on to see whether or not we're truly making progress? And that's all articulated in that campaign plan. This is version 2 of the campaign plan. We just published in October, and we'll publish another in about 6 months, and another in about 6 months after that, because things do change, conditions change, and as a result of that, you got to relook to see what your vision is. It's based on 6 lines of effort. You can see what those lines of effort are. They are intuitively obvious that those are the things that we ought to zoom in on as we run installations. Secretary Hammock's talked at length about energy efficiency and security. I worry about readiness of the force and readiness of the family. We worry about leader and workforce development. Think about this. 120,000 patriotic Americans running our installations on a daily basis, of which only 2,000 are uniformed military. The rest are dedicated civilians doing the important work, and we owe them a workforce development program, and that's part of the campaign plan. The senior commanders out there are our primary customer. The senior commander on the installation is responsible for synchronizing all activity on the installation. He's the one that's truly responsible for the health and well-being of the soldiers, families, and civilians on his installation, and we're here to support the senior commanders, and we've talked about that at great length. Next slide. You can't read this in the back, but I do hope you take a copy of the campaign plan and study that, because what we tried to do in the commander's intent is divide what we were accomplishing into 6 major lines of effort, and it gives you the key task that we're trying to accomplish, and in the back are the metrics that apply to those key tasks so we can measure our performance. And candidly, I just need you to take a look at it and then come up on a note with me and say, here's how we can help. Here's how I can help as an individual. Here's how we can help as an organization. Here's how we can help as a company, because we're all in this together. As both Van and Eric says, we can't do it unless we do it as a partnership. And last slide, please. General Casey has talked now for several years about the importance of managing this 1.1 million person, $245 billion organization as an enterprise. None of us can afford to approach what we do in stovepipes or silos, so he decided several years back that we would look at it in 4 what he termed core enterprises: human capital core enterprise, the material core enterprise, the readiness core enterprise, and the services and infrastructure core enterprise. You can see each of those as a uniformed military individual as the co-chair for that core enterprise, but they're led by the Secretariat. And we're blessed in the Service and Infrastructure Core Enterprise be led by Secretary Hammock. And if you look down the right side, those are the stakeholders in the Service and Infrastructure Core Enterprise. You can see that the Corps of Engineers is there, you can see that the Medical Command is there, and you can see those folks who are making a difference on installations, and they're part of the core enterprise. For example, NetCom is a critical player to give us the IT backbone we need on installations to do what needs to be done. CID Command, the Office of Chief of Chaplains, all those folks that both Eric and Van talked about are members of this Service and Infrastructure Core Enterprise. Next slide, please. All right, we're going to wrap this up and turn over some questions, but I'm making some concluding comments. One, I didn't recognize Jim Boozer. Jim Boozer is being held hostage in the Pentagon. You all just need to know that. Until we get through BRAC, he's not going anywhere. It's a minor task. It's only $19 billion worth of construction and 300,000 people on the move at any one time. And it's all going to come together on the 15th of September, 2011, God willing. But when that happens, Jim might find him a job somewhere else. But this BRAC thing, he showed the video. We're proud of the progress that we're making. He's got great folks working for him on the BRAC piece, and that's very important that you acknowledge it. Eric talked about resiliency, and I hope we get some questions about resiliency because it's the essence of what we're trying to do. You got to be, in these difficult times, you got to be spiritually fit, emotionally fit, physically fit. It's all about resiliency. And then I'd ask you to keep this in mind as we have the conversation. General Casey talked about at the Eisenhower luncheon that everywhere you go you see a crane, a construction crane, and he sees that you know, as the symbol of the Army these days because we got so much construction going on. He has told me, he said, Rick, here's what you got to do when you go out on the installations. You got to get them to quit talking about building new stuff and get them to talk about making the old stuff good enough. Think about what I just said. See, there's going to be less military construction money over time. We have a lot of facilities on the installations these days that candidly have outlived their usefulness because over time things changed. I tell the story when I was the 3rd Division Commander at Fort Stewart, the soldiers in the tank battalions were maintaining their M1A1 tanks in the rain because the maintenance bays were built for M60 chassis and the M60 chassis were skinnier than the M1 chassis. That was the way it was in 2006. That's the way it is today as well. So what we have to do as a community is figure out how to take advantage of available money and make what we have good enough by restoration and modernization. And then we got to come to grips with the S piece of SRM. S is the sustainment piece. We all know what's happening. We are required by OSD to fund sustainment on the installations at the 90% level of what they require. That's what we're required to do, and we work that direction. The sustainment that you get is based on square footage on the installation. Over the last 5 years, we have increased square footage on our installations by 30%. Think about what I just said. The idea was, hey, here's what we'll do. Rather than have you occupy your old building, we'll build you a new building, and then you occupy that new building. That was the idea. What happened? Well, let's move out here and stretch out a little bit. Let's move into the new building, and let's occupy the old building as well. So we got to heat the old building. We got to light the old building. We got to air condition the old building. We got to make sure it's acceptable for what the folks are doing in the building, and that is a problem. So be thinking about that as we talk about transforming installations. How do we take what we have and make it good enough? God bless you all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, if that don't whet y'all's appetite, the presentations that we just heard from the 4 panel members, then nothing will. So the mics are hot. We've got some time for question and answers, so please step up to one of the mics and try to address your question, at least initially, to one of the panel members. Yes, sir.
John Dodson, Thurgate Energy. As we move past the energy audit and the energy efficiency improvements that we're underway at the moment, and we'll end up saving a lot of money for the Army that way, and we get into the point where we're doing serious energy projects, utility scale projects, it is increasingly important that we have people on the other side of the table who understand and are technically competent enough to allow those who would help an ability to efficiently come in and do that kind of work and do it successfully in a reasonable period of time. What are we doing, what kind of a program do we have underway to train our energy managers and beef up and give an opportunity to our teams for those installations that might be early targets for this sort of work? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Do you think I should sing a Willie Nelson song? I got the microphone in front of me, and I always get tempted to sing. Well, you think I should? Maybe not. Maybe later. Maybe tomorrow night at the party. We identified, sir, what you're talking about, so we made a conscious decision, the Secretary and I, several months ago, to appoint a dedicated professional energy manager at East Installation, somebody that the senior commander could go to and say, okay, what is going on? Candidly, our frustration is we got a lot of ideas on installations, but they're not connected in any kind of coherent pattern. They're doing what they think is right at the installation level. And if we get these energy managers working as a team, train them appropriately so they can have the right conversation from a technical aspect with all of you all, then we can improve our capabilities. Share best practices, work better with our partners.
If you take a look at the installation management campaign plan, that is one of the metrics, that each installation is required to have a certified energy manager who is trained and certified and understands energy issues, so they're able to interact on these kind of issues.
Ma'am.
Hi, I'm an Army wife, and I just wanted to express my gratitude and appreciation for this approach that we're taking, particularly having General Lynch up there, the Surgeon General, with the MILCON. One of the things I've seen the Army really do in the past couple of years is respond to the needs of the families in the MTFs and get a lot better at that. So as a consumer, that makes a big difference in our quality of life, which of course affects readiness and retention. There's a couple things that I think that are challenges that we need to focus on that I'm a little bit concerned about with the coming together of Army and Navy medicine, particularly up here in the DC region. I think it's really important to strategically look at how those family programs and services from two very different medical communities and cultures, how that's going to work at strategic levels. I'm not sure that they're doing that at JTF, but I think that's something that we need to look at. The other thing I know it's a balance between the great hospitals that we're building and the fact that we're considering both the families in building those hospitals and some of the mental health challenges that we're facing with TBI and PTSD. Some comments I got from some soldiers and family members is the NICO building, which is a beautiful building and great to look at architecturally. Well, it's round, right? And it's got no corners, and that makes soldiers with PTSD a little nervous. So I think that when we're looking at the construction of these things, making sure that we're incorporating that mental health aspect into it. And finally, I know that General Lynch down at Fort Hood, they have that incredible resiliency center, and it's beautiful. I've been to it, and I think it's important to be there. I'm a little bit concerned, though, that we go so far on the brick and mortar that we're not doing more about putting the services, particularly for family support and mental health, into the units. I think we can do both, but I think we as an Army sometimes focus a little bit too much on brick and mortar, and then it tends to be up there and people don't go to it sometimes. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't have it, but I'm saying that it's really important to walk that line and make sure we're putting those resources in the units as well. Thanks.
Done? Well, great points. Let me take the last one first, and then I'll move in the others and see what General Lynch wants to say. I don't think you'll get any disagreement up here about the importance of putting programs and services and focusing the effort, especially around resiliency, down at the unit level. If you'll notice, I personally take a lot of I take pains to point out in every forum I can that comprehensive soldier fitness, although it's currently being directed by and stood up by an Army physician, Brigadier General Rhonda Cornum, it's more about her long experience and her own personal saga in resilience, having been a prisoner of war in the first Gulf War, and the fact that she's her own training and her experience as a scientist really makes her extremely focused on good outcomes-based, evidence-based approaches to this. That is not smoke and mirrors and you know, wizardry, but real programs that raise the resilience of our soldiers and families through the programs that are being set up. And I think everybody up here would say that we're working very hard to target these programs down to those who are going to benefit from it, and not necessarily embed those only in brick and mortar. You heard me say that for a large amount of the Army, especially the reserve component, access to installations is difficult anyway. And so we're looking at ways that we can reach out. We're currently, as a part of the comprehensive behavioral health system of care, for example, we extend counseling services via VTCs and really provide counseling wherever we can find counselors that can be moved by digits to the bedside or to the death side of a soldier, and we're looking at all of those kinds of elements. The National Intrepid Center of Excellence for Traumatic Brain Injury and Psychological Health is one of those brick and mortar facilities. It's built through the generosity of the Fisher Foundation, the Fisher family, on the grounds of the new Walter Reed National Military Medical Center and the Bethesda campus. You're right, its design is incorporates many of the features of, for example, the Center for the Intrepid down in San Antonio. I personally wasn't part of the design team. I'm not smart enough to figure out what is the best design for people who are suffering from PTSD and traumatic brain injury. I can tell you, though, that the whole feature of this is not so much just as a site for care here, but knitting together academic and industry partners across the nation in a way virtually that allows us. In fact, one of the major features of that building, if you go inside, if you have a chance to do that, is an outreach capability that allows them to project images from some of the newest and most modern imaging techniques for brain function, and do this in a way that can reach across the country or across the globe and share that image with other people, three-dimensional images. It's really phenomenal stuff. Lastly, let me just talk about Navy and Army and the NCR. And I'm glad that you introduced this notion, because this guy right here, in addition to all the other hats he wears, is also responsible for BRAC completion within the National Capital Region. So one of the things we tend to focus too much about, I'm afraid, is the fate of the BRAC of Walter Reed and Bethesda, National Naval Medical Center Bethesda, into this new Walter Reed and the stand-up of the new Belvoir Hospital. The big enchilada of, I can say that because my command is in San Antonio, is there are 400,000 beneficiaries of DoD healthcare in the National Capital Region. 400,000. 37 military facilities, from Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, to Fort Meade's Community Hospital, to Belvoir, to Walter Reed, to Navy, to Annapolis, to the Raider Clinic, to the Pentagon Clinic, Quantico, Andrews Air Force Base. All of these facilities are delivering services to what amounts to the 40th largest HMO in the United States, just in the National Capital Region. Think about that. If we can integrate services, if we can provide family and patient-centered primary care through the patient-centered medical home, which the Air Force, Navy, and Army are in complete agreement about. You want to talk about cultures fusing, this is an important fusion of cultures around that pledge to deliver care. And we can deliver that within one electronic health record that doesn't require that we're constantly bleeding, literally and figuratively, care out into the network, which is why our costs are escalating. I think we're going to have one of the most terrific networks of care available. And this is being looked at in places like San Antonio, Texas, and Colorado Springs, and the Puget Sound. I mean, this is a great transformation that we are helping to lead in. So I believe we're working very hard with the Navy and the Air Force, for that matter, although they are not a major player in the NCR, the National Capital Region, in this. And I do think we're on the cusp of really a transformative step into what we can do as a three-service provider of care. Thank you.
Just let me add one point for the young lady. You identified yourself as a military spouse? Yes. Well, God bless you. Thanks for your service and your sacrifice. And thanks for your insights on the things we need to improve. What we need help with, candidly, if you're relying on us for all the great ideas, we're going to fall short. We need help with folks like you telling us, how can we improve service delivery on installations? How can we do better? And the resiliency camp is just one piece. At Fort Hood, I deemed it to be appropriate to use brick and mortar to get a place where folks can come and pursue resiliency. But that's just a technique. It's not the technique. It's a technique. We've talked about virtual resiliency campuses. We've talked about transformation of the Army Community Services. So give us some insights on how we can better improve service delivery. And thanks for your question.
Okay, we've got probably a little bit of time here for maybe one more question. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, Anthony McKinney from SAP. Question for Secretary Hammack. With regard to sustainability, and I'd say the progress with not only Army but Defense, what would you consider the level of progress or maturity for that program compared to, say, corporate global organizations?
If you haven't seen it, the Army does have a sustainability report and has for the last 2 years, and we're working on our third issue of a sustainability report, which is following GRI guidance, and that puts us at about a B level in our sustainability progress. The Army is proud of what we've done already and has made a lot of progress, but that being said, there's a lot further that we can go. So I would say we're well on our way, but certainly with advancements in technology and strategies that are coming up every day, we've got a way to go as well.
Thanks. And one follow-up, are there benchmark companies or organizations that you look at?
Not at this time, although we have talked about that. One of the challenges is we are such a large and diverse organization, especially with our installations overseas where we're tracking and monitoring some of our use, our sustainability strategies there as well. So at this point in time, we have not benchmarked to any other organization.
Thank you.
Okay, final question? All right, how about a final round of applause for our panel members? And thank you all for coming.